What up? All right. Just refreshing a few things here. So I'm back and no longer doing the no code list. Today I'm going to start something else. So if you saw on Twitter, I announced it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to rebuild yesterday's weather web app version. There's an iOS and Android version that's in the app stores, and there's currently a web app version. I'm going to rebuild it today, and I think it's going to take one more session, but it'll be quick. I actually did a dry run last night and rebuilt it in like an hour. So hopefully I can do it in 2 live sessions. I think I can. So before I start diving into building and Bildr, first I'll go over what yesterday's weather is, like what we'll be building, and I'll actually even show that test one I built so you can see what it'll literally look like. And then, well, yeah, that's probably it. I'm going to talk about Bildr as I go through this stuff because Bildr also has new stuff. A little bit of it I covered at my last live stream, but because I'm doing something more focused, I'll be able to show off a lot more, I think, today. So let me start with just some quick background to set the stage, and then I'm going to jump into actually building as soon as possible. So yesterday's weather is an app that I've built, and the app is actually, it's cool. It's a no-code app. It's built in Thunkable. And I have this website, which is built in Card. And the idea is this website, if you're on the web, if you're not in the app store, basically, you can try the web app version of this. And if you like that, you could use that for free. You could check the weather every day through a web browser if you wanted, or if you like that, the idea would be you'd buy the app. So right now, this is what the web app version looks like. And I can mention too, the app itself, it compares today's weather to yesterday and says a sentence like this: currently it feels 1 degree cooler than yesterday and it's windier. And that data, that comes from an API that I made like a really long time ago. For, I don't even know why, I guess for an original app that wasn't no code. But anyway, I have an API where I just send it a location and it sends me back this sentence. So I'm not going to be going over like how to create that sentence, and because there's a lot of logic that goes into that. Really what I'm going to be talking about in my app is in Bildr today is just calling to the API and returning the data. But let me just show you what it is now and then what it'll look like. So right now, this is what the web app looks like. It's pretty bare bones, kind of purposely. I just didn't spend too much on it or too much time on it. And then right now it only lets you search by zip code. So the main reason I'm updating this, besides that I'll be able to make a better app now, but the app itself is global and takes any part of an address, like a city, a full address, a zip code, whatever. Whereas this web app only accepts US zip codes. And there's nothing I need to do besides just rebuild this part. So it makes sense to do it. But just to show a test, here's a zip code. It says finding your weather, says my location here, which it pulled from that zip code. And then it displays this weather sentence. These are extra comparisons that come back in the data, which I'll show in a second. So I just list them out here. And then I show like a little kind of upsell to say, buy the app. So I'm going to recreate this almost exactly. I mean, it'll look slightly different, but I'll basically start just recreating this. But I would like to add some better upselling and some more stuff in there. So here's the one I did quickly yesterday. I'll just live view it before I start building. So you can see it's basically the same. This is kind of rough, like it's not fully designed or anything. It looks kind of like a sketch, but you can already type anything into there, and then it'll find the weather, type in the address and time, do those comparisons. I didn't actually finish out filling them out, so I'll do that, and then show the upsell. So it's pretty much the same thing, a rough version, and it wasn't too bad to build. It's actually the page itself, there's really just 2 pages on here. Let me zoom out a little. There's this main page, which has just a few sections on it. And then there's I have a separate page to run each of these conditions, but it's very simple. Not many actions. There's this one chain that has a bunch of actions. That's where all the magic happens, but pretty straightforward. So I'm going to dive in now and start rebuilding it from scratch in this new project here. And this, I'm going to do everything basically. I'm going to set up the layout. I'm going to style it. I'm going to do all the actions, and I'm going to explain everything as I go. The only thing is, I think just to save time, I might grab some stuff from this actual project, like maybe some specific styles. But for the most part, I'm just going to dive in and start building. And so what I would do on any project that I start is lay out a few things initially, like the homepage and a few of the initial structure style stuff. So let's start there. And what I'm going to do in Bildr, this is a new project. This is if I went to new project and let it load up. This is just a blank canvas. And Bildr itself is an infinite canvas. So the first thing I need to do is add a page to the canvas. So I do that with this plus button. And here's something, if you've seen previous videos, this what we call a unified search, where you can search for elements, blocks, patterns, and soon more things. This pops up when you click plus, and this is brand new. And so right now I'm on the elements tab, and it's got a streamlined version of the base level elements. And then we now have this blocks tab and patterns, which I'll talk about later because I don't want to go on too many tangents. I want to make sure I build this all in the time allotted. But I will get into patterns. I have to import a pattern for this project, so I'll definitely get into patterns, and then I can show blocks at some point when it makes sense. So the first thing I'll do is just drop a new page onto the canvas, and I'll call it home, since it's the home page. And so now that's blank. You can see the outline of the page, but there's nothing on it. And this element tree on the left is blank. So the next thing I'll have to do logically is add something to that page. So I start off with a div, which I'm going to make into a section. But just as a general note, if you code, you sort of know this. You know, your mind would go to dragging a div. If you don't code, basically everything's div. So div is like a rectangle on the page with no inherent styles or anything, except that it spans the width of the whole page. So this is going to be probably your most commonly used element. So we drop a div on, and now I have an element on the page, but again, it's just a div. It's blank. It's nothing, like a container, you could think of it as. So you don't see anything here, but it is highlighted, and we see that we have an element name. I can choose the type of tag it is. So you can see already probably that Bildr is geared towards coders in this way. So if you know code, Bildr is going to be a dream. You're going to pick it up. You're going to go through this stuff. It's going to make perfect sense. If you don't know how to code, that doesn't mean you can't use Bildr. I mean, it's made for people who can't code, but you will inadvertently or accidentally learn a lot of code concepts, which is really cool. I mean, that's how it should be. Anyway, I'm going to keep this a div, but just going through what these are. So those were the properties. I have styling on here too. So the primary style classes, utility style classes, and inline styles are all built into Bildr. This div comes with a primary div class, but it's empty. It's got no styles at all on it. So that's just if I want to add styles to this div class, then every new div I drop in the place will get those styles. That's what that's for. In this case, I'm not going to use it, but I will use that a lot moving forward. But for a div, I don't need it. So what I'm doing right now is I'm basically setting up some structure. So I know that I'm going to do a section, which is like a horizontal block, and then a container in the center, which is like a centered column. And then I'm going to add like the logo, stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the structure for these sections. So I dropped one div. Now I drop another div inside of it. Actually, I missed it, and now it's inside of it. So you can see the structure on the left shows you parent-child relationships. And in the other app, this is kind of what this translates to. I have a section for logo and search, and then I have a div with centered. So if I select in this div, it's got this class I made called centered. And what that does is I can put sections for each of the different things down the page. So I have section, logo and search. I have section, sentence for this weather sentence, section conditions for these conditions, and then section upsell, which is hidden right now, but that's that graphic that pops in. And then each of those sections, it's frozen a second, hang on. Each of those sections I put on the inside a centered column, which I use a class for that so that every new section on the page is a section. And then directly in each section, the first child is this centered div. I do that so if I ever want to adjust like the width. So right now, sorry, I should have kept this open. It always goes a little slower in the live stream. So right now you can see that it's this wide. that's that centered column class. So it's, I think 900 pixels is what I have it at right now. So even though the screen's wider, it centers it. So that's the reason I do like this. I do a section and then a centered for every section. And then what goes inside the centered is anything. That's whatever you want to appear in that centered column. So in this case, I'm just going down the page. Basically, I'm just going to lay out a few elements. The first thing I'm going to need is this logo. So I add my section class, my section container, I add my centered container, and now I'll just put a logo in. Now, if you are coming into this with no experience coding or making things, whatever, you might just drop an image, which would be completely fine. But I'm going to actually contain my logo image in a div because I always do that coding. So that's kind of like optional almost, but for me it helps because I have this div now that's a logo, and I can do things like spacing, like certain styles I'll put on this container, and then the only thing inside that container is going to be this image. And so an image defaults to this placeholder, and it defaults 100% wide, like big like that. So it looks a little crazy right now, but I can go to image source here, switch it out to the media library, and then I can select a file. So in this case, I'm going to upload the logo directly from my computer. Nice. And I use an SVG because they're completely scalable. Something like a logo makes total sense as an SVG. And so now the logo is on the page, but it looks huge. So just to quickly wrangle that in, I'm going to put an inline style. So we have primary style class, utility style classes. Those are like reusable classes. And then we have inline styling, which in code is the same as writing CSS on an element. It's inline styles. That's for quick stuff or one-off stuff. So in this case, I'm gonna switch this later. I'm just gonna add a quick inline style, and I can show you. It defaulted to use props for me. So there's nothing viewed, nothing visible. But if I click this, I can get all these properties and I can type them. So in this case, I would be like width or max width. But just to show you, if you don't know the CSS properties off the top of your head, there's this all props view at the bottom where you can actually find the section. So in this case, I'm looking for max width. So I'd go into size and I see width, min width, max width. So I can say like 100 pixels, and then I'll make the max width at 100 pixels. Now what's cool is that I set that in this all properties view, but now if I go to use properties, I see that property here. And if I add more, I see them here. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if you're very experienced in CSS, it might be faster to just write all this stuff. You can actually switch to a CSS tab and you'll get the CSS of just the element you're selected on. And so you can, it's the same thing, but different. Like you can add properties into here too. Like if I did margin top for rem and then save it, and I come back to used, it's in here. So a really cool way to do styles, and especially fast. Like you'll see, I'll do it on this demo, I'm sure, but say like I came into here and I'm like, I want to copy all these classes from this button. It's so much easier to come into CSS and just copy them all, come into my next thing and paste them. I'll probably do that, so I won't show it now. But anyway, what it is now, what I have so far is I have a section, a centered column, and actually maybe I'll call this just so it's a little clearer in the demo. Because really what it is, it's a centered column. A logo that holds the actual logo. And the only thing I have is this image, making this image smaller, the only style right now, because just so we can see it a little more clearly. But at this point, let's add some classes to start to create our layout. And so I'll show you before I actually do that. What I can do is I can live view. Live view will show you not a preview, like the actual live view of the site you're building in real time. And it updates. As you make changes in the studio, it updates live. So it's not like the live view link isn't something you'd share out and their users would go to, but it's a completely real live preview that you get to use. And so the first time you live view, if you don't have any URL routes set, like if you don't have it say slash is this page, then it makes you select what the home page is, what slash is. So I'm going to select home. It's my only page anyway right now. And then live view. And now this will show me just the logo basically. But remember, I wanted it in the centered column, right? So I have just the logo and it's pushed all the way to the left side. So the first thing I'll set up is this centered column class. And so I don't need this div class that comes with it. So I remove it and I'll create a new primary class and we'll just call it centered column. And this now, at this point, we're in CSS. So this is just something that I know how to do from CSS. It's not Bildr specific. And if you make your site or your app and you make your own columns, you can do this however you want. I find that this is a super easy way and I do it for all my projects. It's worked for me for years. So this is just how I do it. And so I could, again, be in this all props view, but I'm going to go right to use props and quickly add a few properties. So first I set the actual max width that I want the centered column to be, in this case 900. And then to center it, I give it a margin left of auto and a margin right of auto. And so that's, again, just CSS, not specific to Bildr. But by doing that, it will make this div 900 pixels wide and then center it on the screen. So right here, it's doing that. But this page is not bigger than 900, so it doesn't look centered. But in our live view, it should be. So there we go. So here to here is probably that centered column. And just to illustrate really quickly, let's put a quick background color on here. So you can see that is getting that column. And if I shrink, it stays centered. And if I go even smaller, it's just 100% width. Like that's not getting cut off. That's just 100% width. And I don't, just to illustrate really quick, I guess I can do this. So if I made this 400, then it's 400. All right, so I'm going to keep this 900 for now. I'm going to remove the blue background. And then I'm going to add a class to this section. Instead of div, we're just going to call it section. It's kind of just, again, my preference, but a universal thing I do. And this section class, I don't know if I really have any styles for it yet. So a lot of times I'll add padding just to space out my section, so I can do that for fun. But I can just do like a padding of 1 rem. And that put a tiny padding on the outside. That's all that is. So I don't know why this live view should be updating live. I'm surprised it's not. But anyway, so there's that. So I have a centered column. I know that's there. Doesn't look like much as far as, oh, you know what? I gotta make sure this is correct. Doesn't look like much as far as what it is, but that's gonna go a long way now because every other section I set up, I'm basically taking this, copying, and pasting. Just gotta set it outside of there. And then taking this centered one, copying and pasting it in. And so the way I did it in my first dry run version is I had a div at the top for logo and search. But I think in this one, I'll do a separate one for search. So this section, and another tip in Bildr is labeling these elements goes a long way. It's easier to see on this left side, but when you start doing actions and you're selecting these things over here for the actions, it goes a long way to have these named. All right, so I have logo, then I'll have search. Now I'm just gonna duplicate this a few times for all my sections, because why not? So duplicate, and this one will be the weather sentence, because that is just under the search. After that is the condition cards. I'll show that. When I show that, we'll be displaying a separate page and repeating it as a list of cards. So that's pretty cool. And then the last thing on the bottom, we have like that upsell. So now these are all set up, but the only thing that exists in a section is that logo. So let's add the input now to the second section. So like I said, I add this div. Really, I add a div here almost always just to keep it separate of this centered column. You don't need to add this div, and it doesn't really do anything visually. But for me, it helps because if I need to add styles in here, I don't have to add them to the centered column. It just keeps it a little clean. So I have that div logo, and like this would be like a div for the search. And like, you know, I'm going to have search bar, and under it, I'm going to have the date and time. So I would actually do like a separate div right in here like this for, it's actually location and time. So I'm just setting up that structure, but let's start real elements now. So let's drop an input into the search. And then right next to it, we'll drop a button. And so right now, you can see it's there, but they're not going to actually do anything. I mean, they're real elements. So when we live view, you know, they work and they do stuff, but they don't do anything yet. Under that, in this location and time, I'm not going to set this all up now, but I'll put a quick placeholder. Just a text paragraph, and the display text will say location and time, just for now. And you can also change display text right in here too. I just happen to change on the left there. All right, and then let's keep going down. So that's the search. Now there's this weather sentence. Again, let's just pop a div in there. This I could do as a heading because it's big. That would make it like automatically big, but it's not really a heading. So I'm going to give it a text, just a regular text box. But I'll add some styles to it in a second. And then cards we'll worry about later, and upsell we'll worry about later. So we've just basically set up the very basic bones of what we're going to be here. Logo, search, location, weather sentence. And if I compare that, you know, that's logo, search, location, weather sentence. Same thing over here, just a little more styled. Now all we have styled here is that centered column. So let's start styling some of this out in this initial top part. And then once it's styled, I'm going to do the actions over here to set up that initial stuff. And that, my guess would be that'll be the full day today. But let's dive into styles pretty quickly, I think, here. So the first thing is I have this stuff centered up here. And there's a lot of ways to center stuff. I just did the centered column with margin left and right, auto. But you can also use text align center, stuff like that. In these top two sections, I always want them to be centered. So I'm just going to go right for it. I'm going to go out to this section itself. And I'm just going to go to an inline property. Oops. Say text align center. And then I'm just going to go to this next section and do the same thing. And normally, if you do something twice, or especially if you do it more than twice, you'd make that into a class. So I could make section dash centered. And I could actually make it like a utility class. So that section, it retains, so every section will have a section class. It'll get all those properties. And then some will have a section centered, you know, a text line centered class. And then that will get all the properties of section plus the additional properties of the centered. So I could do that, and really probably should in a lot of cases. But in this case, I'm just keeping it quick. I just put the text line center on the inline style. And I'm going to show utility styles later. That's why, otherwise I would show it right now because it's very useful, but I don't need it. Really, this achieved what I was looking for. Man, this live view is not updating. So that's there. And then weather sentence is also centered, but instead of just centering that whole section, I know there's going to be a lot I'm going to want to do to weather sentence. So I'm going to come in here. So I have the section, the centered column, the div I have around it, and then here, this weather sentence, right? It's all it is right now is a text paragraph default class, which is blank. I'm going to keep that on this element because imagine I want to set all the text color to like a gray, or I want to set the font size. I might do that in the text paragraph class. And then I'll just override the styles I need for the weather sentence in a utility class. That makes sense. Like that's a smart way to build. In this case, I won't set color or font size on that text paragraph class, but you could. And you'd want it to apply to all text paragraphs, including new ones. So I keep that class intact. And instead I add a utility class, and I'll just call it weather sentence. And so now it's text paragraph's empty, but it would take all text paragraph properties and then override or add the properties in weather sentence. So I'm going to go to all props just to show it off. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a larger font. So font size, I'm going to do 2M. And if you don't know, M and rem, they're CSS units, like px, pixels is a unit. M is relative. It actually comes from typography, from the height of the letter M, the M height. But it basically is like if I have 2M, it means double. 1M would be like the exact same size. 1.1M would be a little taller, you know, or a little bigger, you know. 2M is like double size, 0.5M is like half size. Very similar to percentage, but a little different. And so if you use 2M, you're gonna get that size relative to its parent or itself in some cases, whatever the CSS rules dictate. If you do rem, like root M, I think it stands for root, that'll actually do a percentage or, you know, relative to the root or whatever you have set to like your base style class in the body. Anyway, that's a side note, but M and rem are two just really great units. I use them all the time. They're really good for responsive. Basically, setting this font size at 2M means that if I shrink the screen size and I change the body class to be a smaller font size, this will also adjust. Whereas if I had this set explicitly to like 30 pixels or something, it wouldn't adjust. So anyway, I'm going to set font size to 2M. This one I also want aligned centered. So I can come into here and just do text align center. And really, that might be all I need on here. You can see I have the same setup. So yeah, I just have the 2M, 2rem here. I'll put rem on that one. All right, so that's good. If we look at it, it looks a little nicer probably. All right. And then let's just add a few styles to the input and button just so they look good. And then we'll do the actions. And I'll do location after actions. All right, so input, same exact thing. It gets this default input field class. Only in this case, instead of being blank, this has some default fields. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change these so that every input on this app is going to look the same. But just to note, these defaults are a little bit special. So they're the only things that don't get overridden when you pull in a pattern. So if I were making a pattern, I wouldn't use this. Very random side note that you don't have to pay too much attention to. But just felt like I should note it. I wouldn't want someone to make a whole pattern and update these default fields and then they don't update when you pull the pattern in. So in this case, I'm not making a pattern. I'm just doing a project. So I get a lot of value from using these fields, and I definitely want to use this default class. So I just drop the input on the page. I come into this input field class, and I'm going to style the inputs how I want them. So if there's styles on here, I don't need them, and I'm going to override them. So in this case, the first thing, this has a width set explicitly to 200 pixels. I like to do a slightly different method where I set the width to 100%, so it goes really big there. But then I set a max width. Sorry, typing. I set a max width to whatever I want the width to ideally be. So say I did like 250 pixels. That makes this input fully responsive. If I set it to just 200 pixels, it's kind of a weird example, but if the screen were less than 200 pixels, like 100 pixels wide, the input would flow outside of the screen. Whereas if I set the width to 100% and the max width 250, if the screen goes under 250, that input still stays 100% always. So that's just a good thing. And then like, I don't need a min height on there. Padding, instead of explicitly setting it with pixels like it defaults to, I'm going to switch that into just 1M padding. Border radius, I'm going to reset to 0, or I could just remove this because the default is 0. Outline, I'll keep at 0 for now. Outline's good for accessibility. I'm going to add my own accessibility in, so I'll keep outline 0 for now. Background color, that's fine. We can keep it white, and then I added that. So that's probably good for the styles that I input. You can see it looks a little nicer. And then I'll add in the properties, I'll change this placeholder. Instead of enter a value, it'd say something like type a location, because that's what I really want them to do. And then let's style the button quickly. Same thing with the button class. Like this comes default. In this case, the button class is completely blank. Sorry. So I'm going to style the button class, which means that in the future, anytime I drop a button onto the canvas, it gets this button class by default. It'll come unstyled. Right here, this is a completely unstyled HTML button. So let's start styling it. So some of the things I know that I'll do almost always is be like, remove the border, remove the outline, add some padding, and I do this the same as the input here, 1M. And again, you can do this from all props. So if you don't know those CSS properties off the top of your head, you can come into here and find them, click through and see all these options. Or if you're extra advanced in CSS, you can come right into the CSS and just write it yourself. I usually hang out in this used props. I find it very convenient to just mouse over here, type the property, and then use the little helpers to fill it in. So anyway, let's see what else I need. Background color. I'm going to check what I have over here for the background color. And then check what else I have. Color, border radius, cursor pointer. Okay. And then, yeah, so just to finish these out, we'll do a background color for all buttons of this color. We'll do a text color of white. I'm going to just type white. Had a border radius on there of 4 pixels. And cursor pointer, which doesn't come by default to buttons. And sometimes people even debate if buttons should have this, but I think they should, especially in this case. So cursor pointer gives you that hand cursor that you're actually seeing now when you roll over the button. Without it, if I didn't have this, the button just has that pointer cursor still. But I want it to have a pointer like a link because it's just how I want it to function, and people need to treat it that way. So there's that. Oops, let me reselect that style. There we go. And then a very minor detail that I did, if you look at this, I put a border radius on this button. It looks a little weird where it butts up against the input. So I want to remove the left and right border radiuses, but I don't want to do that in the main button class because that would affect all buttons. And it really only applies to this situation right here. So I just do it in inline styles. And I'll say border top left radius and border top, border bottom left radius. And I'll just set them to 0. So it looks a little better. And then actually this input, I don't need the right hand border. Kind of nitpicky really, but I'll just go border right, none. Let's set that to 0. So looking pretty good. I need the button. I don't even know if this is visible in the video, but the button is 1 pixel smaller on the top and bottom because I don't have a border on that, but I do on the input. So I'll add a border on the button quick. Sentence is good. We're not worrying about location and time, so that looks pretty good. I think the only thing left to do, well, here, I'll add that border real quick. So I already have this border property set to none. I'll set it to 1 pixel solid and then the same background color as the button, and that'll fix what I was talking about. You can see that's the same width. And then I'll just type in that actual button. I don't want it to say button. I want it to say, whoops, display text search. So we're good. So that's as much as I think we'll set up for the initial. Now let's talk about some actions, and we'll pull in. So I'm going to call to my third-party weather data to call to the API. Well, first, actually, let's go through it for real. First, they're going to type location. They're going to hit search. It's going to call to my API, send the location, and then send back a latitude and longitude. And then it's going to make another API call to get the weather data where it sends the latitude and longitude, and it brings back weather data. So it's going to bring back this weather sentence plus all those other comparisons and a forecast, actually. So in order to get that all to work in Bildr, we use actions. And actions, so far we've been all on this left side here for elements. Actions are over here on the right side, and they're sort of like equally versatile. Like the elements are very versatile. There's some base level elements, and then you can see I'm doing a lot of stuff. I'm adding styles and adding attributes and setting up my layout without any opinion from Bildr. I'm just doing whatever I want, and the elements themselves are kind of base level building blocks. That's how the actions are too. You've got action groups and you've got actions. And by putting together all these different actions in chains, and then by tying that to events, so it's like when you click this button, run one of these actions, you can pretty much do anything you want, like literally. Like if there's no, you don't have to wait for Bildr to have an action for something you want to do. You can piece these together because there are things like set a variable, or like change the value in an element, or add a style property, or add an attribute. So they're very base level things. It's really cool. So anyway, what I need to do is I need to create an action group over here. We have 3 default ones, which I'll explain what they are in a minute when it makes sense to, not right away. But I can create a new one over here that's an action group, and then I can trigger this button. When you click this button, it runs this action group, and then we'll do whatever we want in there. So let's just set that up. Now I create a new action group. I call it whatever I want. In this case, I'm creating one action group that's going to run through several actions and do everything we need on this page. It's going to query for the location, query for the weather data, set the sentence, set the location, set the car. It's going to do everything all in one shot. So it's kind of this big master function or main function, sorry. So I'm going to say get weather data. Very generic, but that's like the name. That's what it's going to do. So now it slides open this actions panel. So I have get weather data. I have this panel. It's blank. But what I do is I start adding actions into here now. And so to sort of illustrate how this works, I'll do a quick test one. So you can see there's a lot of built-in actions here. And the way this works is usually just search. So if I do element set value, that's a very common and used action. It pops it in here. And basically I choose my element first. So in this, I'm going to do just a quick show you how this works. I'm going to choose the input, type location. And this, by the way, is why I was saying name things. Because when you click this drop down, you have section logo, section search. Like I can see what things are very easily because I named them over here. Anyway, I just chose this input. And the new value I'm going to put is just test in all capital. But what I can do is I can get this new value. I can change it from text to be from a lot of different places. So you'll see this in action in a minute, but this is how the actions work. Excuse me. The action inputs work, where I can say from element value, from a variable, I can get it from a data collection, I can get it current records, all these different things I can get it from, including like system and request, which is like pulling queries out of the URL, pulling, like current system time, all kinds of stuff. For this test, I just did texto and wrote the word test. And so now this get weather data exists, and what it will do, this action group will do, is it will put the word test into here, but currently nothing fires it. So that's the last step of the action puzzle is I click this search button, and we've been working in properties, we've been working in styling, but now I go into events. And in events, I have a click event defaulted here, but I could also add any event I want, like any valid or invalid JavaScript event you can add in here. And these are just out of the spec, but I could even like type my own event, and make it, and I can make things happen. So it's really cool and versatile on this side too. But in this case, I don't need any of that. I'm using a very straightforward click event. And so I just choose for click, I just choose that action we just made, get weather data. And now I see there's a little orange dot up here that shows me there's an event on this button. And I see a little icon that shows me there's an event. And it'll work. So I come in here. If I click this button here, it's going to write test into here. So click it and it writes test. And so that was like a dummy test, but that's how all these actions are going to work. So I'll remove this one for now. If you extrapolate that out, you can see how that can get pretty powerful. And you'll get a better idea after we add like the second, third, and fourth actions in here. The first action I'm going to do, I'm going to make the API call. So that's like a bigger one. But you'll see once this goes on how we're just doing these quick little actions and popping everything in. So yeah, let me just dive right in and stop jabbering. So the first thing we do with this get weather data, or the first thing I'm going to do is get the API data. Actually, you know what? The first thing I'm going to do is a little UI thing. I'm going to change this weather sentence a little. So when you first search, when you first click search, before I even send the API call or do anything, I'm going to update this sentence to say finding your weather, to let the user know something's happening, to give them that instant feedback. So I actually use that same action that I just deleted, this set value. And I choose the weather sentence this time. So here I labeled it weather sentence. I know right what it is. And the value that I want it to say is finding your weather, ... And then I'll label this action in the same way too, because then when I'm looking down this long chain of actions, I can see right what this is. Set value, weather sentence. Oh, okay. I know what that is. Okay, so first step, that's an easy one. Set weather value. The next step is where we're going to actually query to my API. And so Bildr has API actions where you can query to any API you want. And you sort of have to know APIs, or you at least have to be able to read through their documentation, because every API is custom. So you're going to have to write custom values in these fields, but this kind of makes querying an API as generic and easy as possible. So you have these options, or there's another option where you can create a custom. So you can create custom elements and custom actions in Bildr. Everything is like in your project and local to your project, and you can expand upon the whole platform. So you can actually create, like, I could go a different route with this and create a custom action called get weather data, where I just add it here. Like, you'd see it in this list, get weather data. I just add it and it's done. It does everything I need, or something similar. But instead, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use the built-in action here. And by the way, I would write that custom action with JavaScript, which is really cool. But that's for a later tutorial. That's an advanced topic. For now, skip all that. Just know it's possible if you need it. And I would come right into here and I would do API endpoint get and set into variable. And the reason that I'm going to do get and set into variable is because I'm going to send a query to the API, and then what it returns is a JSON string. I'm going to set that into a variable so that I can use it throughout the whole rest of the lifecycle of that app. Throughout the whole rest of that session, I just have this variable and I can use it. And so before I fill out these fields, I'll show you quick. This is how it's kind of set up, which is like the API URL, set any headers you want, the method, set any post body fields you want. And then in this case, because I'm setting it into a variable, I set the page I want the variable to be on. Remember, it's infinite canvas. I can put that variable any page. And I set the actual variable name. And so I'm gonna do that. But before I do, I'm gonna actually show you this API and like what happens, like what it's expecting and how it works. So the first thing that I'll do when I click search, they're gonna type a location into here, right? And then they're gonna hit search. So the first thing that I'm going to do when they hit search is I need to send this location to my API, and I need to get the latitude and longitude from it. And the reason for that is because the weather sentence, the weather data API, only takes latitude and longitude. Let me answer this question. Oh yeah, so for what this app will do, it is a rebuild of this app, which you just, and in this case, you enter a zip code. With a new one, you'll enter any address, part, or parts, but you enter a zip code, and then it gives you a sentence comparing today's weather to yesterday's weather. So it says, currently it feels 4 degrees warmer than yesterday, but it's windier. And then it gives you some more. It compares like the current temp from today and yesterday, precipitation, all this stuff. And the reason that it exists, though, I don't know actually if I can do this on the live stream, but let me try. It's really this app. Sorry, my computer's spinning wheel right now, trying to switch to a screen of just me. It's not that important to see in the app, but the point of it is it's an app, an iOS and Android app. And what I'm building now is the web app component, the web app version of it. And the reason is to upsell people on the actual app, but also because I have this API, so why not build a web app? It's the same thing. All right, that just switched my picture. Sorry, my computer was slow. But this, you can't see it anyway. That's what the app looks like. And so I actually use this app. I built it, but I actually use it every day. In the morning, I check what it was like the day before. Because I walk my dog at 7 a.m. every morning. So it's a really great tool for me. So that's what we're building. Hopefully that answers your question, but if not, just chat a follow-up, no problem. And so to do this process, the first thing we do is we send the location, get back latitude and longitude. That's one API endpoint. Once we get back the latitude and longitude, we send that to the next API endpoint and get this sentence back. And so I'll show you actually what that is. So this is one API endpoint. This is the location. So in this case, I sent it Austin, Texas. That's the input. And it sent me this back. Locations with separate broken down things, city, state, zip, a formatted address, and then importantly, the latitude and longitude. So the first step I do is I query to this one, to this endpoint, I get the latitude and longitude. Then I query to this endpoint, which is the weather data. I send it the latitude and longitude, and it gives me back cards, which is those condition comparisons, a summary, which is the actual sentence, and a forecast. So the summary looks like this. It just gives me this sentence. And so once I query this API in Bildr, I'm gonna have this information that you're seeing here, this JSON object as a variable. The mobile app, to answer your question, Eric, the mobile app is built on Thunkable. So it's not Bildr. Bildr can't do native apps. Although, like, you know, it's not a crazy thought maybe for like someday to just compile into that. But for right now, Bildr is 100% focused on the web and the way the web's built and web apps. So you can create full-on progressive web apps in Bildr that you can have a home screen icon and they can work offline. You can do all that stuff, including like having the manifest JSON file. Everything is there for a PWA. Or you could use a third party potentially and try to like wrap a Bildr web app into a mobile app, but you can't just export direct mobile out of Bildr. Otherwise, you know, maybe I would. Although I think Thunkable is really cool, and there's no reason to rebuild this outside of Thunkable. I built this app, I'm not sure actually, maybe like a year and a half or 2 years ago, I'd say. But this API, I originally actually had this app like 5 years ago, maybe longer, as a coded app in the App Store that I built originally. So that's why I actually built this just to play with Thunkable, and I knew I had this API. So I was like, oh, let me revive the yesterday's weather app. That's kind of the origin story. But now it's pretty cool. It's in the App Store, and I use it again, and people use it, so it's kind of nice. All right, so let's build this now. So first thing I'm going to create is this location API, and the way that APIs work, you send them something, they send you something back. That's sort of outside of the scope of this, but that's what I'm doing. So the first thing is I'm going to set up what I send to them. And so I'm going to copy and paste this out of my dry run app so I don't have to worry about getting it. But this is the URL. And then I have it set up. So I built this. Actually, the URL is slightly different. Let me set that up. So this URL that I pasted in here has the actual URL, and then it has $input equals nothing. And so that's a way that I'm querying this API endpoint, and that's a way that I'm going to send it the input data is in the actual URL string. You can also put that in the post body as like input and then the value here, especially, I mean, I think it has to be a post maybe for that, instead of a get like I have here. But I thought it was easier just to put it up in the URL. The only thing is I have to say what that input is, and I have to get that input in real time from the actual input on the canvas. So instead of just making this URL a text value here, I'm going to use a concatenate. And concatenate, it's not just a code term, but it's a popular code term, which means like put two things together. So what concatenate allows me to do is string multiple different types of inputs together into one input, which means I can do the text input first of the first part of the URL. Then I add another value where I can do from element value. I want to get the element from the current page that I'm on. And the element I want is this input here. And so actually I can rename this like I was saying. Well, it's type of locations. Actually, that works. I know that's that input. So what I'm saying is make a string, make a value here that combines the web address that ends with $input equals, and then add on whatever value is in this input. So in this case, it would say $equals Austin, space Texas. In this case, it would say input equals 78767, which is a typo on my zip code. That's funny. And then, so that's the URL. And then headers, I built this API, so I know what it expects. It needs a header to say content type application JSON. That's a very specific API thing. It sounds kind of codey, but if you looked at the documentation for an API you wanted to use, they would tell you to do this. And furthermore, 99% of modern APIs, this is exactly what you want to type here. Content type, application JSON. I mean, you could come back to this video, and if you try an API, it doesn't work, come back to this video, use that, it'll probably work. But it does tell you that too. And there are different cases, like JSON's super popular for modern APIs, but there's definitely some widely used APIs out there that will return XML, for instance, or something else. Then you would actually need not application JSON. I think it's application XML, but I'm not even sure if it's that. Anyway, I knew I needed those because that's in my API, so I set those. Method is get. also part of my API. If you try to use a different method here, it'll fail. Post body's blank. I don't need it. I'm passing the only value I need in the URL. And then I just choose where I want the response to be set. So it's setting the response in a variable. I can put that variable on the current page or any pages in my project, but I want it on the current page. And we'll just call the variable location data. Or actually, let's call it location response, because that's literally what it is. Okay. And so let's see, that should be everything. So now when I click this, it's going to send that location that I typed in. It's going to return that. It's going to set it as a variable. So I think let's test this. And I'm just going to look in the console and see if that variable is set. Normally, to check if that variable set, you want to output it somewhere maybe or do something with it. I'm just going to do a little shortcut. So Austin, Texas, click the search. Finding weather worked, so we know that that it went into that action. And I can actually come in here and do that. And I can see that location response here, that variable that I was trying to set, does look like it worked. It comes in with an input, Austin, Texas, and then it comes back with this location data. City, formatted address, lat, launch, state, zip. And that is exactly this format that we're seeing. So what that means to me is that I have this variable now that I can use in my app that includes the latitude and the longitude. And so I don't need to do anything else right now with that API call. I just use that data. The next thing I'll do is actually make a second API call and I'll send it the latitude and longitude. And so I just add that same action again, API endpoint get and set into the variable. And like I could do this one if it were a different scenario where I'd set the response into an actual element. But I don't need that in this case. I just want the variable and I'm going to use the different parts of that later. So variable. Now in this case, so these actions are running sequentially. In this case, I don't want this action. I want to wait for this number 2 action to finish before I run number 3 because I'm using the response from number 2 in number 3. So I just click this little wait here. There's a wait, don't wait toggle. If I hit wait in between, it's going to run this action. It's not going to wait. It'll right away run this action. If I have this wait, it's going to wait until this gets its response. Then it's going to run this next action. So it's a little minor thing, but very useful and necessary. So for this one, let me grab that URL from my test run project again. Sorry, it froze up on me a second. While it's like a little bit frozen for some reason, let me just explain what we're looking at. If you got API endpoint, and this is that concatenate again. You got API endpoint that ends in $lat equals, and then I use a variable from the current page, and I use that location response variable that I just created. So location response dot location dot zero dot lat. I'll show you how to find that in a second. So it unfroze. So I'm going to copy this. In this one, I'm going to change it from text to concatenate. Enter that first part where lat equals, and then I'm going to enter the second part, which is a variable. I'm going to get it from the current page, and I know that it's location response. But what I do is I have to look. This was like, I'm looking here, but you would be looking in the documentation of your API if you do this with a different API. I look in here and I say, okay, this is the object it returns. So this is that variable location response. So I can see location response dot locations, and it's an array. So I want to take dot 0, the first in the array, dot lat. That'll give me latitude. So the way I find this variable I'm about to type is this way. If you don't know JSON or how to read these things, you could brush up, but honestly, it's pretty straightforward once you understand it. I'm just like following down the path of this object and getting down to here to get the value I need. That's all I'm doing. The confusing part is this is a bracket, so I know it's an array. Like there's some confusing parts in there, but really all I'm doing is getting down to the value I need. And it was this variable dot locations dot 0 dot lat. That's how it works. So I can type it just like this with dots. That's how you type it in code. But just to mention, another thing you can do is that there's this paths down here. This is going to get a lot of love in the future. These paths are going to get treated you know, like a full UI around them, but they're super powerful. So that's the same as adding like a dot and more. I could do it like that. It doesn't matter. The code's going to treat that the same. The thing about paths that makes them powerful is not when you do this, but it's you can actually do some JavaScript functions like split or replace all, like those kind of things. So it gets pretty cool. But anyway, for now, I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to say location response. Actually, just because I want this to be a little easier to see, I'm actually going to put this back out here. That way we can just see straight up what it is. So right now I'd have the URL lat equals lat, but I need to add another part to this concatenate, and I need to say and longe equals the variable for longitude, which is location response dot locations dot 0 dot longe. And so that together sets up the URL. And then, Eric, to answer your question about getting access, I can probably help you out, especially because you have an idea for an app. And if you're watching this and this looks like something that would make sense to you, I'd be happy to help you out. But just to note, we're letting people off in batches, but we're gonna rip the Band-Aid, so to speak. So if you are on the waiting list and you haven't gotten an invite, first of all, there's a lot of batches are going to be coming out quickly, so you'll probably get one soon. But if not, we really want to have everyone off the waiting list and like instant sign up like as soon as possible. And I can't say a time. I definitely can't say more than that live because you never know what's going to happen. But really, like our goal is to let everyone in as soon as possible. But in this case, if you DM me on Twitter, TrueDrewCo, or I don't know, just somehow just chat me and I'll need to know your email address and I can help you out. All right, so let's see. So we set the URL only so far. I'm gonna finish this through with that content type header. And then method is still get. I don't need anything in the post body. And then here, I'm just going to set a different variable for the weather response. So now I'll have this variable called weather response. So we're going down the line. We change this word here. We grab a variable called location. Then we grab a variable called weather. And that's what we do. And then at this point, we're going to do like the harder, no, it's not harder, but the more heavy lifting stuff to set this weather stuff into the UI, like onto the screen. But it's been an hour on this live stream. It's 2 o'clock my time now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set that in probably and then call it a day. But we can pick back up and I think we should be able to finish everything next time. But just to show you, this is where we are. We did 1, 2, 3. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more actions in this group in order to get the rest of what we saw or what we do see in this demo. But for now, let's just do that first part and then call it, because I think we did cover a lot. It was a pretty good day. So up here, I changed the weather sentence to finding your weather. Then I did the API queries, which take a second. That's why I wanted to update the sentence while it waited. But now I want that sentence to actually say the response. So I just add another set value down here. And again, I wait in between because I want to make sure I wait for this response. This time, I choose that weather sentence. But for the value, instead of text, instead of just typing it out, I choose from variable. I'm on the current page. I choose my weather response. And then I just have to find the sentence. So I happen to know it's in summary here. So this is the weather response collapsed. I know if I go to weather response.summary.0, because it's an array, .sentence, it'll give me that sentence. So I go weather response dot summary dot 0 dot sentence, and voila, that will update that weather sentence. So let me just try it all out. And like this, good note, like this will not say location and time by default, and this will not say weather sentence by default. It's just how they are currently. So let's say Florida. Finding your weather. Looks like it actually didn't work. Whoops. So before I go, let me just see if I can find out why. Oh, okay, it did work. It just, I probably had that variable. Oh, that was really slow. It did work completely. So in Florida right now, it's 4 degrees warmer than yesterday and it's less windy. In New York, it's 4 degrees warmer and more cloudy. Seems like it's fake. Let's see. Just happen to know that random Marietta, Georgia zip code. I don't know what's going on that it all says 4. I might actually not be sending the correct weather data. That would be funny. But in any case, it's generally working, and I would just go in and fix it if it's not correct. If this one says 4, it's probably incorrect. Oh, there we go, 7. That was just a really random coincidence that all those locations had a 4-degree difference. So anyway, yeah, that's it. That's as far as I'll go today. But it'll be easy, I think, to finish this up next time. And Eric, I do. So this stream will be saved on Twitch for 14 days. So you can come right back to like Twitch. Well, what you're watching now, twitch.tv/workandwhistle. But also after that, I put them on YouTube and then put them up. And right now, I don't have a place to put this one. I have a full dedicated site for when I rebuilt the no code list live. But for this one, I'm going to make a new site, put the no code list videos on it, put these videos on it, put future videos on it, and more. So I just don't have a URL right now for that, but I will. I think actually it'll be live.workandwhistle.co. Ooh, my YouTube. And yeah, I was going to say I'll definitely put it on YouTube, but what is my YouTube? I don't know. Actually, let me just find that real quick. It's funny because I don't really use YouTube too much, except I just started to for this. So this. All right, so I just chatted. Oh my gosh, making me sign up. I didn't chat. Sorry. My YouTube is this. If I try to chat it right now, it's going to make me sign in. So I can maybe, how's the best way to get this over to you? I'll just sign in, I think. Nah, I don't know anything on that. It's probably working whistle. Sorry about this. Just feel like it's not a good link to have to retype. I have no idea on my Twitch login. I'll find a way to get it to you. Actually, I think I've seen you on Twitter before. I'll send you. I'll DM you. Or actually, if you DM me about early access, I'll get you this link. Sorry about that. Just learning all this stuff. All right, so let's see. So yeah, so I'm gonna call it now. I think that's it. Next time, if you have any questions about what I did today, feel free to ask them next time or ask me in between. I'll address questions. If you thought that was too fast on any of that stuff, too slow on any of that stuff, I'd love to know. But otherwise, I'm just gonna come back and do the exact same thing and keep finishing this off. And my guess is that by the end, we'll have it 98%. Maybe every detail won't be complete, but we can probably finish it up. So I'll look forward to doing that and kind of capping it off and keeping it simple. And then after that, we're going to do a lot more Bildr stuff. Since more people are coming into Bildr, we're going to do a lot more getting started type demos and walkthroughs and that kind of thing. So I'll announce that. That'll all come with the website too. It's just trying to get everything out at once is hard, but the next few days, all that stuff will come out. So thanks for watching. Eric, thanks for asking questions. And what's today? Friday. So see you on Monday.